Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I decided to do something a little bit more personal. I decided to talk about the movies that really shaped me in how I perceive films. These are movies that I don't necessarily consider them all to be the greatest films ever made. I don't necessarily consider them to be even my favorite films, but these are just movies that had an impact on me in either how I view films, in terms of the path I've started to take in my own life, and just how I genuinely try to process things. Like even just not even film wise, but even while I'm in school for performing arts, and also just while I'm doing anything. These are the kinds of movies that really. These are the movies that got me in a certain way. So this isn't necessarily a list that is going to be an opinion piece. This is just facts, just straight up facts. And what I'm going to talk a little bit about what they did exactly that really, really changed me. So the first film I want to talk about. That's not the first film that had an impact. I want to go down actually the list basically on recentness, when these movies kind of had an impact on me, or the gravity or the weight of the impact they had. The first one I want to talk about is American Psycho. The reason this movie had such an impact was actually because it was the same time I bought the book American Psycho. And I bought the book because, there was a kind of time where I was like in the rebellious phase of my youth, where I wanted to see movies that, my parents didn't want me to see, or movies that my mom was like, oh, don't get that movie. I'm like, oh, I'm getting that movie. Films like, like Dallas Buyers Club or Fight Club or stuff like that. There's a lot of clubs I had to join, but anyway, American Psycho was one of those films where I bought it, and I started reading the book first, and I got bored because I didn't like reading. So I watched the movie. Then I watched the movie, and I didn't get it. I was confused. I was like, wait, what? What was this about? And I was so confused, and I was like, I don't understand. What is this movie about? Was it about a serial killer or not? I'm not entertained. What's going on? So I then decided, okay, well, I'm going to read the book. And so I read the book over the course of a few months. I even brought the book with me to Italy, so on my Europe trip. So I'm sitting there in Italy, like in Capri, like, beautiful scenery, beautiful buildings, and wonderful people. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, I'm going to put my nose in a book about an American Psycho. And when I read the book and I watched the film a few more times, I started to realize, oh, this movie really got me to understand the importance of adaptation, especially adapting material that is very, very difficult to adapt. American Psycho, the book, is a very, very disturbing and very upsetting book. There's a lot of things that Mary Herron, the director, wisely kept out of the movie because there's some things that no one wants to see or even think about. And Bret Easton Ellis wrote about, and I think he did it to a very good effect, but Mary Herron knew how to direct it. And this is when people say to me, oh, that book was so much better, the movie doesn't understand the book, I always say, right, but remember that even though that the movie has to be shorter than the book in time, it needs to cut things out, not just because it needs to benefit its own story, but also because it needs to get rid of a few things, because maybe it's not something that needs to be shown. Like, a lot of people can say, oh, but the book's better in a lot of situations, but there's a reason they might have taken it out, or to make their own story. So that's something that I actually, I thank American Psycho for. It was a very interesting experience to live through that in high school. I thought that was, that was something that was really impactful for me. Now the second one is a little bit bigger. It's going towards Birdman. The reason that Birdman was so influential to me was, I loved this movie when I first saw it, but it was the first time I really wanted to seek out seeing more quote-unquote art house cinema. Like whatever we consider art house films, not necessarily just blockbusters. It came out in 2014. I saw it in theaters with my mom and my brother. My mom and my brother didn't like it. I loved it. Everything it was communicating to me, I really resonated with, but what really got me was simply, I didn't hear anything else about it. I saw a trailer for it in just on YouTube one day. I'm like, oh, look at this trailer, Birdman. Okay, I thought it was like a fake trailer. And yet, it was a movie that was coming out, and I had no idea. And it won Best Picture. It was a movie that I genuinely was like, well, I'm very glad I saw this. And it started me on the path of trying to find more art house films. I mean, you've seen my series on the Criterion films. You know how much of an impact this film has had on me to try to find more films that are outside what is mass marketed to individuals. Just trying to find movies that are more, artistic. And it made me consider film more of as an art form and try to find those movies in theaters and not just wait for them to come out on DVD and try to search for them while they're out. The next films, there's two of them, really got me to consider a very important thing that I think it comes down to when it comes to people building an opinion on movies. It's Don John and it's Brokeback Mountain. I own both of these movies and I love both of these movies deeply. Don John was, I think, a little stronger for this, but Brokeback Mountain is where my passion really grew from it. Don John is a movie about Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. He's a man who, he watches pornography, but it's a movie that is all about people's fantasies, the way that media affects our feelings of relationships. It affects people's fantasies and the kind of things that they perceive as a perfect relationship. And then contrasting that with individuals who are really, really trying to experience something and really trying to make a connection with someone. It's all about unconventionality, and I love that kind of thing with romance films, like I've talked about. Favorite genres of filmmaking are romance, horror, and film noir. And these are both expert films in romance. Like, I think Don John's my favorite romantic comedy, and Brokeback Mountain is one of my favorite romantic dramas. And the big thing that I realized in taking away from it is that these films inspired me to watch movies and actually build an opinion on them, and to actually stand up for movies when people say, oh, that movie's just the movie about pornography, or that movie's just the gay cowboy movie, or that movie's just where the fish banging movie for like Shape of Water. It's just the Lady Gaga singing movie. Like that's all these films are. Moonlight. It's just, no, Call Me by Your Name is white moonlight. And those statements, I'm just like, no, it's not. These movies made me realize how important it is to, one, shut those statements down the minute you hear them. If anybody ever says, oh, it's just this, no, it's not. You haven't seen the movie. It also made me really understand how important it is to really pay attention, really let the movies kind of take in, and really build your own opinion when you see a film. I know somebody, but also not to push movies on people. I have a relative who's really, really hates The Wolf of Wall Street, and what they think it stands for, but they haven't seen the film. I always ask, have you seen the film? And they're like, no, I have no desire. I'm like, okay, yeah, great. You have no desire? Great. Then you think The Wolf of Wall Street is the worst movie that has come out ever. I know you're wrong, because it's a masterpiece that Martin Scorsese created. I know that your opinion has no basis in fact. You have no opinion because you haven't seen the entirety of the film. You don't know what the movie's trying to communicate. But I know that you do not want to see the film because for whatever reason, you just don't. I can respect that fact. And these movies made me realize, hey, stand up for movies that people decide to dump on for stupid jokes. Or try to say quick, easy jokes to get a laugh out of people. And stand up for art because it is important. And stand up for art that is not necessarily things that are popular. Like, a movie about two gay men who are repressing their love for each other because they have to live a life that is like actually hunted down and killed in that time. And then also stand up for movies that you may have stumbled on and one day you just fell in love with it and then you saw it. Stand up for films like that. The next movie is kind of in the similar vein, Beauty and the Beast. Talked about this movie a lot, but this movie is the first example, I think, when that really got me to stand up for animated films and say, you know what? Animated films deserve the same attention that films like Brokeback Mountain and Don John do. Really stand up for them as an art form, and don't just dismiss them as kid stuff, and don't let big companies, exploit the nostalgia of what you think is so special about these movies. Let them know, no, this is what's special about them. But also not. I don't mean to say that in terms of like, I'm the only one that gets these things. Like, I'm the only one who understands what movies are trying to communicate, because I'm not. I mean, it's a subjective art form, and anybody can pull something from them. It's always a discussion, but there's a difference between having a discussion and, like, for the Brokeback Mountain Don John case, where somebody's just saying something and, like, shutting down any, like, making a statement that is just not true and not trying to promote conversation. They're just hating a film for no reason, or they're trying to spread just this easy, quick, mindset of this is what the movie's trying to do, when they have really no basis of that. What I'm trying to do here is, what I'm trying to do all the time is just try to promote a discussion. I'd like to have a conversation about these movies, and have a conversation about controversial movies, unorthodox movies, or animated films, or any film in general. Like, I don't think it's right to just make videos of saying, oh, you guys are wrong how you feel about these movies that you've seen before, and that you've pulled all this knowledge from because of this, and why you think these movies are bad. Like there's a reason I haven't done a Star Wars video on this channel, is because Star Wars is a toxic thing to talk about at this moment, and I don't want to promote toxicity on my channel. I want to promote discussion, and a healthy discussion, not just a one person talking. I want to promote you guys with this, like, feeling of, yeah, I could talk about this with my friends and family. Maybe not on this in the comment section, but I can promote a person-to-person, face-to-face conversation with somebody without feeling the need to yell at them and tell them that they're wrong because something I hated is the dumbest thing in the world, or something I loved is the greatest thing ever made. I can just talk about why I love these things and why they're great through the evidence that has been given to me through the art. That's what all this is to try to promote that. And quick side note, if you guys ever feel that what I'm saying is offensive, you don't like it, if you think of something that you just hear and you're like, I'm sorry, I didn't appreciate that, or that really made me feel bad, like, about myself, I'd love to know why and what that effect was for you, and I'd like for you to let me know, because I never want to do that. That is never my first thing. I like to have a conversation. I like to promote positivity, and if you think that I'm being rude or insensitive, please let me know. The second last film I wanted to discuss is a movie I don't own because I don't like this movie, but it was the first film I ever wrote a review for, and it's The Nightmare on Elm Street. Or A Nightmare on Elm Street. Sorry, I just got a flash of corn gas. The Nightmare on Elm Street? It's A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Nightmare on Elm Street is a little bit dehumanizing, thank you very much. Anyway. Let's show. A Nightmare on Elm Street was a movie that I saw. It was the first ever movie I decided to write a review for. I watched the VHS tape. I watched it in my laundry room. We had a little TV in there. I watched it. I critically analyzed it. I kind of made some notes. It was the first film I really kind of made my structure on how to watch movies, but I kind of stepped away from my own original take because I thought, people will react more to points and numbers. But it was the first movie that really I came up with the idea of, owning a movie, seeing it in theaters, renting it, Netflixing it, skip it. That's, kind of where that attitude came from. Because I wanted to talk about how you should see a movie instead of just, whether it had a certain value to it. Because I don't think that's necessarily how we should judge any art. It's kind of the consideration of, should I buy this painting, or should I just see it in the museum, or should I just, walk past it? Is it worth my time to really analyze? This is a movie that, and that was what it was. That all that Nightmare on Elm Street was. It was the first movie that got me to really sit down and really critically look at films. It was also a horror film. I didn't really watch horror films until then. The first few movies I reviewed were horror-based. Evil Dead 2, which was actually my least favorite film for a long time until I saw it like 3 different ways with 3 different groups of people. Predator, Terminator, I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the first few like in that same category. I have a whole book of it. It was, yeah, but that was the first. That was the first. And now we get into the movie that really got me to be who I am now. Not necessarily based on my personality, based on all that, but got me into this set of the person I present to you guys. The person who talks about movies, the person who likes talking about movies and finds the value in it. And this is the movie that genuinely made me consider, you know what, this can be a career path. Because in junior high, I wrote my first ever screenplay, 14 pages long. Filmed my first ever film. It was a 25-minute video. It was a 25-minute movie. It's the first time I really ever considered filming. I kind of copied it. It wasn't necessarily direct copy, but I took the elements. I was able to see what elements worked in terms of conflict and real growth. And that movie was Dawn of the Dead. The original, George A. Romero. Found this movie for $3. You know how much it is on Amazon? $400. Screw you, Amazon. No, I love you, Amazon. You've given me so much. This movie, once again, not a perfect movie. I was so worried. I saw it again recently. The one that really I grew up with, was watching it on YouTube, was the director's cut. This is the theatrical. The director's cut is an excellent film. This one's really good. This is one I'm glad I own it. It's a really great film, but unfortunately, I think the director's cut adds some things that I think richens up the story. But this was the movie. Whenever we were in film studies class, after we were watching some of the movies, like No Country for Old Men and Titanic and The Breakfast Club, I watched this. I was in a group of people, and I remember we were in a group of like misfit people, kind of like the people that nobody else wanted to be in a group with, and they wanted to do a documentary. I didn't want to do that, so I dropped out of that group, and I made my own film. I was the only person in the class who went on my own. And I made a zombie film, and the reason this film made me realize that this kind of thing, like filmmaking for me, was possible, was because this movie was low budget enough to be approachable, but also intense enough and actually well written enough to make me say, yeah, you gotta think. You can't just make the simple, you can't just make something like that. It can be simple, but it has to have some kind of heart. But at the same time, this movie made me realize, you know what? Yeah, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of stuff I want to be doing. And even at the moment, while I'm talking to you guys, like this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. I like doing this, but this isn't the thing that makes me wake up in the morning and say, oh my gosh, did I make a review? Did I make a video for somebody? Did I get enough hits on this? Like, this isn't the thing that matters. What matters to me is discussing and opening up myself through this platform, because I guess this is what the kind of people, what we need is like a social media presence. But if I'm going to make a social media presence, this is the kind of thing I want to do. Talk about something that I love, and without Dawn of the Dead, I don't think I would have been the same kind of person that I am. I wouldn't have made my first film at age 14. I wouldn't have done it in the course of, basically in the course of a few weeks. I wouldn't have a Criterion collection. I wouldn't have a whole Blu-ray collection. I wouldn't understand the importance of all that, because without that movie, I wouldn't have thought that this was possible. Seeking out and trying to make movies and me actually making films, I didn't think was possible. And that's the film that did it for me. I'd like to know, what were the films that hit you on that level? that inspired you in a way that really you found changed your life, changed the path that you took. Because there's a lot of movies that, a reviewer that I respect, Chris Stuckman, he talks about the movie Signs. I do not like the movie Signs. And yet I can tell how much that movie had an impact on him in his life. I understand that even though that movie for me, and like, I can absolutely see like the issues with that movie. That movie has a lot of problems. I can see where he has been able to find the positives in that because it had such an impact on him. Stuff like that I understand. And I'd love to hear from you guys what those films were. Yeah. Take care, you guys.